I'm pretty sure that everyone has that one movie they saw growing up, the one that just blew you away when you watched it. It's hard to describe, but just something that immediately sticks with you. I don't know what it says about myself, but for me, that was A Clockwork Orange. From that first beautiful moment of Alex with his droogs in the Korova milk bar staring into the camera, I knew I was hooked. Even today, the story is as captivating and relevant as ever. The bleak dystopia contrasted with sweeping classical masterpieces is just a match made in heaven. But in recent times, I haven't heard much about the series lately, and it got me wondering if anything has been done with the series over the years. So let's grab some Milk Plus, gather the droogs and droogettes, and explore whatever happens to A Clockwork Orange. Hi everyone, my name is Otto, and welcome to Exits Examines. We'll be exploring the lives of people, companies, and more after their prime time has seemingly come to an end. If that sounds good to you, there's a like and subscribe button below. It may be hard to imagine by today's standards, but when A Clockwork Orange released, it's safe to say that it shocked the world. These type of brutal and intense scenes had many people wondering what depraved and terrible mind could think up such a dark future. Well, the answer is actually quite a cultured one. Anthony Burgess lived an astonishing life, surviving World War II and excelling as a writer, teacher, composer, journalist, and playwright, and it would probably be safe to call him a bit of an intellectual. Born in Manchester in 1917, Anthony Burgess was surrounded by music from a young age. His parents would take him to regular concerts, which would ignite in him a lifelong passion. Even at school, Burgess was already composing songs and was particularly interested in jazz. It wasn't just music though. He was an avid reader and found enormous inspiration in the works of James Joyce, and especially A Portrait of the Artist as a young man. And many of his later works would actually revolve around James Joyce. These foundations, music, literature, and James Joyce would all be deep influences that he would pursue throughout his entire life. After serving in World War II, Burgess embarked on a teaching career, eventually landing in Malaya and Brunei. It was during his time here that he began writing, treating it as, quote, a sort of gentlemanly hobby because I knew that there wasn't any money in it. This experience of teaching and travel deeply influenced his works, particularly his first published novels, the Malayan Trilogy, which explored themes of colonialism and cultural clashes. Unfortunately for him, his next teaching position in Brunei proved less enjoyable. Suffering from the effects of heavy drinking, poor nutrition, a harsh climate, and professional pressures, he eventually collapsed in a classroom. He was misdiagnosed with a terminal illness and given a year to live. However, luckily for droog enthusiasts everywhere, this turned out to be wildly inaccurate. In the 1960s, Burgess returned to the UK and truly dedicated himself to writing. Most people know him for A Clockwork Orange, which he would probably hate, and we'll talk about that much more later, but he actually had a huge and long-lasting writing career. Between 1960 and 1965 alone, he churned out over 10 books alongside composing music. This insane output continued throughout his entire life. Novels, short stories, literary criticism, music, even screenplays, which is truly impressive stuff and honestly inspirational in a way if you are like me and a professional procrastinator. Anyway, after a brief stint touring around the world in an effort to avoid taxes in the UK, Burgess wrote what many consider his masterpiece, Earthly Powers, which was published to international acclaim in 1980. So, to understand how Clockwork Orange came to be, let's go back in time a bit. The 1950s in England were a troubled time, with a nation and people that were struggling to adjust with the realities of post-World War life and their own changing identity. It was into this mess that Burgess returned to Britain from Asia, and he encountered a starkly different nation from the one he left. A rebellious youth subculture of what would be called the Teddy Boys had emerged, and England collectively clutched their pearls in anxiety over this juvenile delinquency. Burgess was also heavily inspired by an absolutely awful incident where his wife was attacked by American servicemen stationed in England during World War II. Similar to The Warriors, which, side note, I've also talked about in this channel, A Clockwork Orange was written in an incredibly short period, with Burgess saying it only took 3 weeks to write. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth over the name A Clockwork Orange, and Burgess has explained that he overheard the phrase "as queer as a clockwork orange" in a London pub during the war and just assumed it was this Cockney expression. Quote, "As queer as a clockwork orange" is good old East London slang, and it didn't seem to me necessary to explain it. Now, obviously, I have to give it an extra meaning. I've implied an extra dimension. I've implied the junction of the organic, the lively, the sweet. In other words, life, the orange, and the mechanical, the cold, the disciplined. I've brought them together in this kind of oxymoron, this sour-sweet word. A huge draw of the book is its unique blend of gritty realism and elevated aesthetics, perfectly embodied by its language, nadsat. Taking its name from the Russian suffix meaning teen in English, it's a fascinating mix of Slavic words and Cockney slang, and oh my god, does it not just work. I mean, it's fun to listen to and even more fun to say. Listen to this, and sorry for not doing it the justice it deserves. "Then, brothers, it came. Oh, bliss, bliss and heaven. I lay on Najoy to the ceiling, my Gulliver on my rookers, on the pillow, glazies closed, rot open in bliss, slooshing in the sluice of lovely sounds. Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh." Great stuff, right? Even if I did butcher it. Also, just a quick shout out to my personal favorite slang, eggy wegs. Burgess realized that if he used existing slang, it would just become dated within a year, so he decided to just make up his own, and he's mentioned it also served as a way of describing violent scenes in the book without being too graphic. But it's not just the language that's a crazy mishmash of juxtapositions. Technological advancements exist alongside societal decay. The elite enjoy sports cars and modern homes while the rest of society deals with crime-ridden cities. And all of this echoes anxieties around government control during a time reminiscent of 1984. Even the main character, Alex's one redeeming feature, his love for classical music, is used to underscore acts of horrific violence, both by individuals and the state. So, for those of you who don't know this timeless tale, let's do a quick recap. Right. We follow the story of Alex, a terrible psychopathic teen with a penchant for a bit of the old ultra-violence, breaking and entry, and classical music, preferably all combined. The first part of the story follows him and his gang of droogs as they seek out opportunities for robbery and assault until his friends betray him and leave him at the scene of a crime. Sentenced to 14 years, Alex volunteers for an experimental treatment called the Ludovico technique in exchange for early release. This horrific therapy conditions him to feel physically ill at the thought of violence and accidentally makes him hate the one relatively innocent joy in his life, music. He becomes transformed into a defenseless shell of his former self, and without the ability to defend himself, he becomes a pawn in politics and a target for revenge. The story ends with Alex eventually working alongside the corrupt government that so wronged him, and this is how the story would have ended if you were in America. The book's final 21st chapter, which was omitted in the US until 1986, shows Alex maturing and rejecting violence all on his own. American publishers felt that this was unrealistic and not as appealing to American audiences and insisted that his violent nature endure. The iconic Kubrick film reflects this darker US version, and this brings us nicely, my droogs, to discussing the film. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange opens with Malcolm McDowell's unforgettable performance as Alex, staring directly at the audience and setting the stage for one of Kubrick's most iconic films. It stays remarkably faithful to the novel's spirit, even elevating many scenes, which is incredible because the movie was shot on an insanely small budget, but boy did Kubrick make it work. Opting to film on location to save money in London, the set design here, it's just, chef's kiss. It's a thing of beauty, and it artfully mixes this high-end sci-fi-esque pieces with gritty, graffiti-covered London locations. And this is all elevated by the lighting and color palette, which changes for each of the 3 distinct sections of the film. And there has to be a mention of the score, which is a masterful blend of classical and electronic music in this perfect mix of gorgeous and haunting. Malcolm McDowell's portrayal of Alex is legendary, and he just perfectly embodies the character's charisma, unpredictability, and intelligence. Interestingly enough, before Kubrick cast McDowell, Mick Jagger himself considered playing the role with none other than the Rolling Stones themselves as his droog, so yeah, really gets you wondering what could have been. Despite sparking controversy upon its release, A Clockwork Orange became a box office success, grossing over $100 million worldwide. The film resonated internationally, topping the charts in France and performing well in the UK and the US. And over the years, A Clockwork Orange gained status as a cult classic, which is not surprising because its themes of control, violence, and suppression are surprisingly evergreen, and in some ways more relevant today than they were all those years ago. Today, it's considered a hugely influential work and helped establish the popularity of the dystopian genre. It's particularly popular with younger audiences, and a lot of people see Alex and the entire aesthetic of the Droogs as something like a blueprint for counterculture movements like punk, metal, even emo. That's not to say it's all been smooth sailing though, because of course with the violent nature of its contents, there's been a ton of censorship attempts, most notably in the US and even in the UK after violent crimes were committed allegedly inspired by the film. Despite doing well in the UK, Kubrick had the film withdrawn from the British theaters for decades because of the controversy, and it wouldn't be until the spring of 2000, 1 year after Kubrick's death at the age of 70, that it would be shown again in the UK. If you think that Kubrick had a troubled time with the film, well, that's been nothing to how Burgess feels about it. The book I'm best known for, or only known for, is a novel I am prepared to repudiate. Written a quarter of a century ago, knocked off for money in 3 weeks, it became known as the raw material for a film which seemed to glorify sex and violence. The film made it easy for readers of the book to misunderstand what it was about, and the misunderstanding will pursue me until I die. I should not have written the book. This hatred eventually gave way to a tired acceptance, but not before a falling out with Kubrick. Actually, there's an entire documentary exploring Burgess's difficult relationship with the film, the French 2023 A Clockwork Orange: The Prophecy. Now, this is a bit of speculation on my part, but I think because both Burgess and Kubrick didn't have entirely positive associations with A Clockwork Orange, there were relatively few adaptations over the years. One notable exception was Andy Warhol's experimental 1965 film Vinyl, which captured the rebellious youth spirit of the era and is a direct adaptation of the plot of A Clockwork Orange. One avenue of adaptation that A Clockwork Orange has been surprisingly successful with has been theater. There's been a ton of theatrical performances over the years, and the Anthony Burgess Foundation, which by the way was a great resource for this video, has a specific page dedicated to cataloging the mini plays over the years. So there's the question, will there be any new works in the Clockwork Orange universe? Well, it's unsurprising that due to Burgess's perception of the book, he never wrote a sequel. But actually, plot twist, he did make a sequel. There was a 200-page unfinished nonfiction follow-up which has been described as part philosophical and part autobiography called The Clockwork Condition. In it, he allegedly addresses his feelings and the controversy surrounding the book. The manuscript was found at his house after his death, but was never published, which, depending on the contents, may or may not have been for the best. So, whatever happened to A Clockwork Orange? Well, the book and the film experienced a meteoric rise upon release, even amidst the heavy criticism for their violent depictions. Both creators, Kubrick and Burgess, developed troubled relationships with the work over the years, and no sequel has ever materialized. Despite the controversy, the film has become an enduring counterculture icon, and its influence is likely to be felt for a very, very long time. So, thanks for watching, and if you see me at the Kurova Milk Bar, the Milk Plus is on me. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this to the end. If you want to do more to support me and help keep this channel alive, please check out my Patreon in the link below. And as always, if you ever have any suggestions about what you want me to cover next, just drop a comment. I'm always really interested to hear what you have to say. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.